Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another live edition of the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And of course, I'm your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert. And for those of you that have been following the show, you know that our show is here to highlight the stories of veterans, their experiences, and what a lot of them are doing now after their service. And of course, to bring on veteran service organizations to provide you with some of the most recent information that'll help you. So we thank you for joining us this evening. Before we get to tonight's guest, I want to take a moment to thank first, of course, our sponsors, Quest Jewelers of Merrifield, Virginia, and Pete and Juan Tane there in their showroom in Merrifield have got an excellent supply of beautiful jewelry. You got to go on the website, take a look at it, questjewelers.com. I told you, if you get a chance, call, ask for Pete or ask for Juan if Pete's not there, and tell them you watch the show, and they'll give you a discount if you shop with them. So, please take a look and support them as they support our veterans program. I also want to thank Nationwide IT Services. NIS is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business located in Fairfax, Virginia, and it is owned and operated by retired Army Warrant Officer C.K. Park and his crew. And C.K. and his wonderful staff of, I got to tell you, he hires a lot of veterans and supports not only our show, but veterans and community initiatives as well. And whatever your business needs, they'll be able to help you, whether it's training, IT, security services, program management. CK and his wonderful crew will be able to help you out. So please take a look there at the website. There's their email. Get in touch with them if you're in need of help, and they can help you out. So those are our two wonderful sponsors. And I want to introduce tonight's guest. And I have to say, this is an honor for us, because this is our first time that we've had a retired Army general officer on the show. And Bob Wood, sir, I want to tell you, it's great to have you on, and thank you for joining us. And for those of you in the audience, Bob served 36 years of active duty in the United States Army, and of course, starting as most officers do, as a platoon leader through company command, and then, into battalion, and on his way up, and actually spent some time in with the National Security Council during the Reagan administration, and then culminated his career with the U.S. Joint Forces Command in Norfolk, Virginia. Now, of course, Bob being a retired general, you would think, probably a graduate of the Academy, West Point, which he is, and he's got a master's degree from the University of Chicago, and he's also a graduate of the Army Command and General Staff College. So, Bob, I want to thank you so much, sir, for taking the time to come on the show and be with us this evening.
Well, it's my pleasure, First Sergeant. I hold First Sergeants in high regard. You allowed me to call you Paul, and you can call me Bob all day.
That's great, because I don't wear my rank anymore. Besides, my wife outranks me at home no matter what.
I know, yeah, that's right. Household six.
Isn't that rough? Yeah. I still remember when I got pinned as a first sergeant, and we had the ceremony, and I still remember my wife telling me, you might be the first sergeant, but I'm the household sergeant major. Yeah. So she said it pretty early. So, right. But yeah, so it's really great to have you on, and I want to spend a little bit of time though, because you have such an illustrious career. I mean, 36 years and retired as a 3-star, and so I know you've covered a lot of dirt. And in fact, one of the things you talked about earlier when you and I were talking is we kind of had some of the same beginnings, I think. Now, did you I was going to ask you what branch, did you spend most of your time in the artillery branch, or was that just part of your career?
Well, no, I was a field artillery officer all the way up until I became a generalist as a general officer.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
So but you have your normal staff positions and those sorts of things. I kind of branched into economics. I taught economics at West Point, and that was after my work at Chicago. And went on to some other interesting jobs and really became more of a strategist in my staff time, and spent time working in the Pentagon, the White House, and other areas as a strategic planner. And but anyway, yeah, no, I feel like every time I could get back to the field artillery, I got back, and ultimately was very privileged to be a division artillery commander down at Fort Stewart.
Oh, wow. I do have some pretty fond memories of my time in field artillery. It was my first enlistment. So, I was in a fire direction center. And in fact, a few shows back, I actually had a retired first sergeant who spent his career in field artillery as well.
Yeah, and well, it's red legs on the advance here.
Yeah, I mean, he and I, our careers were so parallel, it was uncanny. Assignments, different places, even though I had changed fields. So you spent your entire career up to the point when you became a general officer in the field artillery branch.
Sure, I was designated that, but then once you're a general officer, your time and your location is going to change very quickly. So
yeah,
no, I enjoyed it. I started out at Fort Carson, Colorado, and it was a great way to start. Vietnam was winding down. There was a lot of challenges in the Army at that time in 72, 73, 74.
Yeah.
And but I learned everything I needed to know from my 13 Echo fire direction members in I was a fire direction officer. So you weren't in my FDC, but I learned a lot from those NCOs, and was happy to be there doing that work in that period of time. Volar, the old Volar Army. It was crazy. Fourth Infantry Division.
I spent some time. I spent a tour at Fort Carson, but by that time, I had changed over to the Chemical Corps, and so I was in 2nd to the 7th Cav there, assigned to their NBC recon platoon for the Cav squadron. Yeah. But it's interesting you talk about that, because my first tour of duty in field artillery was in 2nd ID over in Korea, and I had a lieutenant that taught me to compute safety. So when we went to the field, he would let me to compute the safety, and of course then he would check it to make sure it's correct. But yeah, he was teaching me a lot of things, and I always respected him for that, and I always valued that time of learning some of the things that you officers did.
Well, we learned a lot about our branch, our profession from our NCOs. And in fact, my second assignment, they were forming the 2nd Ranger Battalion out at Fort Lewis. And I had indicated I was interested in going to an airborne job because I airborne qualified Ranger. And so I was out on an exercise, probably evaluating a fire direction center. And of all things, my sergeant major called me on the radio. Now, how many times does a sergeant major call you on the radio? Particularly as a lieutenant. I thought, something's wrong at home. He said, I just got a call from the Department of the Army, and that they're forming a unit out in Fort Lewis called the 2nd Ranger Battalion. And you have to leave and be there in about 40 days. So wow. Selling the house, making the move, it was fantastic. It was hard, but 8 months pregnant. Margaret was pregnant, but we climbed in the car and headed for Lewis. And that was a stunning change, because the Army, in particular, General Abrams, who was the Chief of Staff of the Army, was very intent on kind of establishing a unit as an example for training standards and, frankly, a wonderful professional unit. And I ran into the greatest group of NCOs you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
Who and the sergeant major of that unit, and many of the people that I met and served with in that unit, I ended up serving with throughout my 36 years in the Army, because it really put us all on a great azimuth and an understanding of what training really was about and what standards were needed to be applied. But the Army was going through a big change then anyway. It meant not that we were significant in other than doing our job, but we had a lot of high pressure on the training model, the performance, what we were doing, how we were doing it. But we had keys to the kingdom. We could jump when we wanted to jump. We could travel. We did all the environmental training all over desert, mountain, Arctic, you name it, and all with a remarkable group of soldiers. And probably really made my my mind up on staying in the Army because there were so many other things going on in the Army. But to fall in with a professional group like that was really important to me and many of the others who stayed. I mean, I had for 35 years following, I had cohorts from that unit. Anyway, so I went from there to some other, greatest in Korea. In fact, my next job was in Korea. I was in the 1st to 38th in Fort near Camp Stanley, probably where you were in Korea.
No, first 38th Infantry.
No, 1st 38th Field Artillery.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. See, I was thinking 38th Infantry up near Camp Hovey.
Yeah, no, I was
outside Tongdashan.
Yeah, I know. Well, I later came back when I commanded the 2nd Infantry Division. I knew where all the skeletons were and had already spent a lot of time over there, and that too was a wonderful assignment. Completely different, looking at the other end of the telescope. At the units. And
when were you the commander of 2ID?
2002 to 2004.
Oh, okay. All right. See, I was retired. I retired in 2001. So, because I did 3 tours in Korea, and every last one of them was in 2ID.
Yeah. No, I was in Uijeonbu, and then TDC up there, and
Tongdashan.
Yeah, so I had a lot of time in Korea. And I enjoyed serving with the Korean military. Yeah. And the difference between 2000 and 77, 78, my first tour, and then going back in command. That was 77, 75, 77, and then I commanded from 2002 to 2004, and to see Korea prosper as it did, and to understand the mission that was, transformed. Great time in Korea. I have great affection. My father, who was in the Army, he was an infantryman. He had deployed with the 2nd Infantry Division over to Korea when the war started. He was a plans officer at Fort Lewis, Washington, in the G3 shop. They said the war started, and he deployed. He was on the first unit aircraft into Korea, bringing the 2nd Infantry Division into the space.
Wow.
Later on, commanded up near Hovey, in fact, battalion. But so a lot of ties to Korea.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I mean, the 3 tours I did over there, I really liked. The duty was really hard, but I liked it, and the country was interesting. But I mean, so you've been all over, and of course, once you hit those general officer ranks, of course, I know, you were in the what the soldiers like to call the brass and trash assignments, way up at the top. That's what they used to joke about.
Yeah, it was interesting though. I really enjoyed I got into economics and teaching there at West Point, and I wasn't interested so much in being a comptroller, running the books, as I was in resource allocation and how that was done, to get the mission done. So I enjoyed the strategic planning side quite a bit. Became ultimately the Army Senior Strategic Planner. And as we were transitioning after 9/11, so that was an interesting time to put some of that. Let's change the model on the fly and go from being conventional post Cold War into counterterrorism and counterinsurgency, counterterrorism in particular.
Yeah, I mean, well, let me ask you this though. I mean, throughout your career, you've served at so many different levels, and in so many different areas. I want to ask you, once you moved your way up, I would imagine you probably looked back on your time as a young platoon leader or a company commander or a battalion commander. And did you ever miss that once you got up in those other positions where?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be, sent back to troops multiple times, even as a general officer. But you can't being on the green ramp heading out on a jump or rappelling in Panama in the jungles. I mean, just you're bulletproof. You're 25, 26, and you're stomping your way through Alaska in the middle of the winter. I mean, so there's great fun. My wife always says, she was with me the whole way, 36 years in the military, and somehow it all worked. And she kept saying, "You still having fun?" And, and she said, okay, you could stay. but I'm dead serious about, that moment in the Ranger Battalion, and that really at a moment in time, the Army was going in the other way out of Vietnam, going through its own catharsis. I look back on that, with great pride. I look back on my teaching at West Point, because I was able to go to school as really the only active duty. I was in civilian clothes person on the University of Chicago campus.
Oh.
And so I was kind of a lab rat, every so often when they wanted somebody with a little bit of dust on them to say, hey, come over and be at this class or be in this seminar or do whatever it was. Meanwhile, I was trying to figure out what finance was all about. That's a little bit more than a fire direction taught me. But no, I mean, it's the Army was absolutely wonderful in terms of education, training, experience, and the people. Yeah. And just as soon as West Point was done, then I was on my way to do some strategic planning at the National Security Council, which was really, really an amazing job.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Which, is a major, you get to kind of look under the covers and understand what's going on there.
Yeah.
No, I look back on every chapter and particularly every unit and the people in the unit with, great affection. But and all good things come to an end at one point, right? When they run out of jobs for you, I'm saying, okay, I'll put me out to pasture if you have to. But no, every day, loved it.
No, I have to tell you, I agree, because, I was enjoying my time even as a first sergeant. And then I was playing Frisbee football with my soldiers one morning for PT, and my upper body went one way, my lower body went another, and there went my knee. So, yeah, that kind of was what kind of pushed me out the door and knew it was probably time to retire. But, I was fortunate, too, because I had a chance when I was an instructor at Fort Benning to go back to school and finish grad school. And so,
this Army's all right.
Yeah, I mean, it was great. But I have to ask you, though, before we take our break, with all of the time you spent in and all the things that you did, was there one, I guess I could say, is there one most memorable experience or assignment that you had? If you had to pick one, what do you think it would be?
It's pretty hard. I can tell you, taking a battalion in Desert Storm over to the desert and falling in with the French as their direct support, as an artillery officer, and firing like crazy. Everything we had in the back of the truck. I had a towed artillery 198 unit.
Okay.
Trailing through the desert, way over there on the far west side, at the big left hook. That was a seminal event without question as an operator.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed my time teaching at West Point because it was a great family assignment, because the men and women and the Corps cadets and the challenge of teaching and really learning every day more about myself and more about the profession. That was a great family time. And then professionally, I would say, and on the staff side, I would say the National Security Council was in the running, but ultimately the cherry on top was the division, 2nd Infantry Division, with all the lineage that went into it. And I was able to, and it was, you and I were both there. I was unaccompanied, in the jobs we were in, but it was an accompanied job when I had the division. And so the two of us were a command team, having at that point had about 31 years together, with everything in the Cold War that taught us and everything in the post-Vietnam taught us. And it's great to have a teammate.
Yeah, I mean, so you have quite a few to pick from. It sounds really great. I mean, 36 years as a career is just incredible. Well, we're going to take a quick break here and get a word from our sponsor. And then when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Bob. So, sir, if you'll hold on for just a minute, we'll be right back.
You bet.
All right, welcome back, everyone. And you've been watching the WGSN-DB Going Solo Veterans Corner. And our guest tonight is retired Army Lieutenant General Bob Wood. And in the first half of the show, if you've been listening, he was sharing some of his time and experiences. And over his 36-year Army career, I can't even imagine 36 because Bob, you were doing that stuff when I was just finishing high school. So it's an incredible. But thank you so much for not only your service or all those years, but for joining us tonight. I wanna now kind of shift gears a little bit because I know when you retired in I think 2009 it was you actually you founded your own organization and then you went on to go to the executive vice president of the Armed Forces Communications and Electronics Association. So I know that you were talking about how, some of the assignments and some of the teaching you did while you were in the military, and now you've somehow morphed into the Electronics, Communications and Electronics Association. So how did that come about?
Well, I one of the DeVarty commanders I had in Germany called me up. I had started my own business when I got out there in Alexandria, Virginia. And he said, "Hey, I'm about ready to retire. I think this job's for you." And I'm like, "Okay, tell me more." So he had retired and brought me over, and I liked what they were doing. It's a very professional organization that really works in a whole host of IT and communication. I'm a field artillery and strategic planner, but the point is, it was a high level management position, and you had good people doing great things, and I really enjoyed it for about 8 years. But it was a little bit startling, but frankly, it was another large organization with a really good mission. A lot of shows that we put on around the world.
Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of advancement of the thought leadership of all the services, all the branches. A very important area, AI, IT, command and control. So no, it was another fascinating chapter to go into, having done a lot of work with my company, which was a consulting practice, by the way, with one of my cohorts from the Ranger Battalion, but also one of my best friends from my childhood days when we grew up together at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, if you can believe it. And so he was the other member of the business. And so, but after that, working on that for 8 years, I transitioned I left that after that period of time in 2009, moved into being 2009 was I moved into founding American Veterans Vote a little bit later on, 2014. So I did time with my own company, and then got a call. I had run for office in Alexandria, Virginia when I got home. And just because I grew up and I went to high school there, I saw some things that needed, I thought, to be fixed, and felt it was entirely reasonable to put my hand in the air and run for office. I didn't win, came close, but really enjoyed that experience because it was, serving our community just as much as we serve our country.
Yeah.
And on reflection, I learned a lot. I learned all my neighbors' names. I learned every street. I learned every door. I learned every issue. But I found it important work and constructive change. But I got a call one day from a fellow named Daniel Gade, who had been one of my armor company commanders in Korea when I commanded the division over there. And Daniel was running for the Senate in Virginia. And he said, "Sir, I know you ran for office here locally. I'd love to pick your brain," which he did. And ultimately I said, "I think you're the right person for the job, and I'm happy to help in any way I can," which drew me into a crowd of like-minded veterans who were supporting this man who had a good race, ran a good race. He didn't win, but at the end of it all, we looked around. No one else was really doing what we were doing, and that is, as a group of veterans, continuing our service, in this case, helping in the political space.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, Paul, in the military, we don't do politics or policy. That's someone else, someone higher. And we're worried about the mission. Yeah. We're worried about training and standards and our people and our families in the mission. But ultimately, I think a lot of veterans get out and they look around and say, well, that was fun, but now what am I going to do? I'm going to get
Yeah.
school training, transitioning, move my family yet another time, move to another community. And things may not be perfect. I mean, the job may not be there or have left, or the schooling might not be what you want. And I am a firm believer that veterans are problem solvers by nature.
Yeah.
They have kind of grown up in a environment where leadership was valued and frankly taught and experienced. So here they are in a community with some problems they're trying to think about solving, or really something they'd like to see change. And so working with Daniel Gade, this group of us, about 40 of us, fell together and kind of decided what we're going to do is create an organization called American Veterans Vote.
Right.
Why the name? Because the guy who came up with the name was my PSYOP lieutenant colonel in Korea in my G5 shop. And he came up, he had just by chance had fallen in with this group, as a couple others had done that I'd worked with before. And he'd been told by all the political professionals, well, veterans don't vote. Well, that really made him mad.
Yeah.
He said, why don't we call ourselves American Veterans Vote? So it's a statement of fact. It is a bit of a warning, because there's 21 million in the United States veterans. There's about 110,000 veterans in Virginia. And if you put a comma in there, American Veterans, vote, it's a call to action.
Yeah.
So we're very happy with the name, and we incorporated, became a real entity, and set about learning what it is we didn't know, because it's not like we all fell out as a political professional, and I was the only one that had a tiny bit of experience. So first thing we did, you'd appreciate this, Paul, we developed our code of conduct.
Yes.
And that code of conduct was important to us. And to be a member of this organization, you simply have to sign the code of conduct. And any NCO would look at it and say, I understand what you're doing here. Don't sully the reputation of the people who came before you and what they built. Dignity and respect for all. Just things that, a good professional coming out of the military would appreciate and understand.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I just want to interject here. When I was looking at the website, AmericanVeteransVote.org, and I know Cece will put that up for us, but when I was looking at the website, that was one thing that struck me. I saw that code of conduct, and I read it, and I thought, you know what? That's impressive. That's a good idea. So I just wanted to, I was going to mention that, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Well, I'm glad you noticed it, because I can tell you it was about the 8th of January of 2020. And that's when everything was going on in DC at the Capitol building on January 6th.
Yeah.
And we were looking at what had happened, and we knew the veterans were included. Everybody wanted to seem to highlight if a veteran was noticed on the street there. We understood their frustration. There is a positive and constructive way through the ballot box, and we felt we could help in both educating and motivating and saying, listen, understand the problems. So we decided to work on 3 specific problems, and that's serve our veterans and their families, protect the Constitution as written and amended, and secure the nation in home and abroad. Those are our 3 goals.
Yeah.
I didn't say party or anything. Those are the 3 goals. And so with the code of conduct is kind of our marching orders and our goals, and a mission, frankly, to grow this organization in Virginia, get it about right. And then if we need to scale it, we will. And we forever are getting requests to do just that. But the thing about Virginia is it always has an election going on. They always have a scrimmage field just outside the door. So we just set about making a reputation, building our brand, and frankly, establishing networks. Sound familiar? Very soft kind of thing in terms of networks, and have a wonderful group of people that have been all volunteers who have now built the brand and provide support and opportunities for veterans to be involved in the political space, even run for office.
Yeah.
And it's something that's not natural to you and I have been in for so long, or to the policy and politics of what goes on around us. We've always been working the mission. But it's so interesting to see I can't tell you the number of meetings I've been to where, I have an opportunity to say, how many veterans are in the room? It's a lot of hands go up, whether it's
Yeah.
a school board meeting or it's a political setting or it's a problem solving session for something that's important to veterans or state level activities. So we're very proud of what we're doing. Continues to build. We're not trying to be another veteran service organization like the VFW or American Legion, but we're really proud that really no one is really at membership level doing the things we're doing to give an opportunity to veterans to become part of the solution, as they always frankly end up being, in my opinion. We all have problems. We're not the same, but we all swore an oath to the Constitution, all of us at one point in our time, and understood what that obligated us to do. So continuing the mission, working as a team, working around other veterans. We have a hoot. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But in this case, getting change, promoting change for the ballot box.
Well, you know what? I really like that too, because when I looked at the website, just kind of looking through, I think to me, I've often told my wife, I say, to me, I think I spent all that time in the military, not only because it was a career that I chose, but I felt like I was doing a service to the country, protecting the Constitution. And I said, I will defend someone's right to have their opinion or, any of that kind of stuff. But I was telling her not too long ago, I said, but you know what? We've got to make sure that we do not allow anyone to endanger our Constitution or our way of life. And I think that's so important for us as veterans because of some of the things that we've done and frankly, the oath that you mentioned that we took. And that was one thing that impressed me. And in fact, I'm retiring from my civil service career at the end of this year, which means I'm retiring for good. And I may actually look you guys up to see about joining in to see what some of the things are that I can do when I retire.
Well, I appreciate that. A lot of people at that stage, I'll call you and I old, okay? There's a lot of young listeners, but we're old. When you get to this point, it's a lot about giving back.
Yes.
It really is to your families, to your community, in this case, to those who are working in a common purpose to build out this organization and help veterans understand, frankly, their power in the political space. I mean, with 710,000 veterans, and we know who they are in our database. We know what their track record is, and we use it carefully, privacy, of course. But this is a sizable force who, if they get an understanding of what they believe collectively is important, can stand and deliver. And we've worked now for 3 years. Our first time we really worked was in Virginia during the governor's race and things like that. And we found that we were able to motivate veterans to turn out and vote. And we beat the average percentage in this large population of voting in Virginia. Veterans voted, 67% of them voted in that election against 55% for the average. So that's 12% in a very large election. So veterans can get it done. They can really get it done if they realize the power of their collective activity, the political activity in this case.
Yeah.
And, we say we don't try to win arguments. We try to win elections. I mean, we're not another, we do have policy. We write the policy papers because we have to have, there's got to be a there to what we're advocating, what we're doing. But there's a lot of people who are, trying to score points on the argument scoreboard. We're trying to promote constructive change through the ballot box. So we have a whole process of interviewing candidates and endorsing them or not. We think we have about over 450 members, and it goes up every week, who are in Virginia, and that continues to grow rapidly. And so it's fun to write, it's fun to talk, it's fun to meet, and we haven't found really a bad day yet. We'd like to win once in a while, a little bit more than we might in whatever race we want to be supporting. But veterans are just inherently a community member. You can be getting your car fixed, and you can see someone with something on the back of their
Mhm.
T-shirt or on their hat, and you say, where'd you serve? And it's not 2 minutes that you're already down into the first sergeant stories, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
and
yeah, you're right.
or the chief and his story. So if you're interested, of course, the website AmericanVeteransVote.com, you can get
Yep.
there to us through that. We're working in Virginia. I know this broadcast goes pretty broadly, but certainly in Virginia. But if you're
Yeah.
interested at all, I'd love to talk to you, kind of give you a feel for what we're doing. And we don't, we're not trying to score points in arguments. We're trying to win
Yeah.
elections. And that's the mission focus that's so appealing to the veterans. They say, okay, I understand. Where do we have to do, and what do we have to do, and when do we have to do it? It's a little bit fish out of the water, but with the folks you're with, pretty quickly you're more than happy to be joining in.
Hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, because like I said, when I retire again at the end of the year, I've got, I'm going to continue doing this show, which is one thing I enjoy doing, and this is part of what I want to do to give back, is to give this voice and this platform to veterans and veteran issues. But there's some other things that I'm looking at. I've done a little guest curator work with the Manassas Museum. Some things that I would enjoy, but this would be something I think I'm going to take a look at, and I'll probably contact you a little bit here down the road when I'm finished. But
That's fun.
I wanted to ask you something, and I know you said you're not a veteran service provider, but something that kind of jumped up at me, I just wanted to kind of toss out to you. You guys are trying to get the veterans organized, get the veteran vote out, and all of that type of stuff. Has it ever come up where you guys have had to think about, while you're promoting the veteran vote and trying to encourage people to get the vote out, trying to provide disabled veterans resources of where they can reach out to make sure they get to vote?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's what's interesting going on in this year, the last 2 years in Virginia, just as an example. The absentee vote has now become, no excuse absentee vote. You don't have to say I was working, I was sick, I was out of town. You just say I need an absentee ballot. You can register for permanent absentee ballot. And it's so easy to do. It's on our website. It's on the material that we have. But you can register for absentee ballot. And on the first day of early voting, you get your ballot sent to you by the state with all the candidates registered right there.
Yeah.
And you vote and you send it in. And it's like absentee ballots that you and I did while I was in Europe or in, Korea or wherever it was. But it is now in Virginia. It's on mail. You just sign up, register. You can actually also track your ballot, so when they send it to you, and you can say I voted and send it back, and the register will say we got it. So there was a lot of the mistrust of this physical nature of a piece of paper on voting day that you dropped in but the voting has changed so dramatically now that one of the main emphasis we're working on, our goal is every veteran, every vote. And we're really working hard on asking veterans to consider the absentee ballot using information we provide. And then the candidates are right on a piece of paper that comes from the state that lands in your mailbox, in this case on the 22nd of September, first day of early voting. And so for the disabled American veteran, there you are. You've got everything you need to get the job done. It's I see it's same in Pennsylvania. You're right. It's changed broadly in the nation, and there's a bias against it because tradition dies hard. But it so serves the veterans who are out busy doing their job, or educating, or in school, or whatever, or retired. And I strongly encourage veterans to look at the absentee ballot program that's in your state. Particularly if you can track your ballot. All of them have this capability where you can track it when you ask for it, when you got it, and when you sent it. So the trust issues are helped. They're helping. And the greatest thing about it is if you voted absentee, someone's checked you off on the list. They're not going to mail you any more material. They're not going to drive you crazy with phone calls because once it's received, it's received. And that's public knowledge through the registrar's office in all the states. And folks like us who are out there trying to get veterans to vote, knocking on doors or shaking hands or whatever it might be, it's made it efficient. It's different, but it's important. And we say, vote day of vote, that one day, let's say on the 7th of November this year, that's good. Mail-in vote, that's great. But best is an absentee ballot, because that way you're done with it, and you can frankly involve yourself perhaps in the political discourse that's going on in your community.
Yeah.
Now that you've voted.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I have done that myself because I'm a disabled veteran myself. And, I talk to a lot of guys who are in the same boat. And I know it's an important concern to a lot of them. Well, Bob, before we wrap this up, because this is some really good information, and, we have your website there on the screen. But before we go, I want to ask you one more question as we wrap up. If you had just one message that you'd like to share with the other veterans out there or the audience in general, just one thought, what would it be? What would you leave them with?
It's simple, but it's obvious from what I've been doing here for the last couple of years, and that's vote. Yeah. Vote. You served, you earned, you fought for it, or you served for it. It's very important and it's very powerful. And be a leader in your community as it relates to this. It's just it's that important. Change. You can sit on your couch and throw things at the TV, or you can say, yeah, okay, that's it. What can I do? It's as simple as understanding what's at hand in terms of issues, and who's talking and doing, not just talking and doing what you think is important. And so I've learned that a late lesson that's extremely important. That's part of that giving back, Paul.
Yeah.
Part of that giving back, because your perspective, no matter what you did and how long you served, your perspective of a meritocracy of the military, serving with all races, ethnic backgrounds, regions, all of that, your ability to work in that setting it's more unique than we think it is. It is. And so you have an enormous amount to offer and provide, and a perspective that truly matters, particularly when we're trying to unite a nation that seems to be more and more divided. Yeah. One team, one fight, is one of my old commanders used to say. And so the ability to unify around common purpose is something, again, it's kind of in the DNA. It's what you learned the third day of basic training. All this Lone Ranger stuff got trained out of you. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And so veterans have a great deal to provide, great leadership to offer, and no one has to think the same way. No one has to be exactly alike. That is entirely not the model of the military, because we understand how it got put together around mission. So there's a lot of things veterans have to offer.
Yeah, I mean, that's you're definitely right about that, and the vote is important. So yeah, I want to thank you for that, and I want to thank you so much, sir, for taking the time to join us on our show today. And we want to get the word out about the AmericanVeteransVote.com. So for the audience out there, make sure you check it out, see what it's about. And Bob, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening.
My pleasure. We're in the middle of reconstructing. You're always reconstructing the website, but another veteran said, I can really amp your website up. So I'm so excited about that. We're in the middle of a major restructuring from a wonderful veteran who said, let me help you. And it's just so typical. But thank you. It's a great opportunity. I appreciate the ability to talk about what we're doing and, heck, all the fun I've had in the military.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. And for those of you out there in the audience, as you know, we always try to share a tidbit of information with you. And the VA now has a program called the Yellow Ribbon Program, post 9/11 GI Bill, where they're expanding the use of the GI Bill to family members. So for those of you that are out there, make sure you go to the VA website, take a look at it. And there is the website there, va.gov/education. And just go in there and search for the post 9/11 Yellow Ribbon Program and check it out, because it's something that you're entitled to. It's something that could help you or a member of your family. So make sure you take a look at this new program at the VA. So we want to thank not only our guest tonight, retired Army General Bob Wood, but we also want to thank our audience for joining us. As you know, we're the WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, and I'm your host, retired Army First Sergeant Paul Holbert. We thank you for joining us tonight. And for the veterans out there, as always, we thank you for your service, and we hope to see you on our next show.